Hello, here with another review video thing. It's been a while. I think it was July time when I last did a video. But I'm very excited today to be able to talk about this. I didn't think at one point we would ever get this one, but we have the new Super Deluxe edition of Revolver by the Beatles. This is the 5th release in this series we've been getting of Super Deluxe versions of Beatles albums. This one follows on from 2017's remix and expanded edition of Sgt. Pepper, 2018's White Album, 2019's Abbey Road, and last year's Let It Be. Now, for a while, it didn't look like we were going to get anything pre-Sgt. Pepper because of the way it was recorded, all the older albums. But we have, and I'm going to go into how it's happened in a minute. But in terms of this box set, I'm going to go through, this is the vinyl, I'm going to go through the contents of it. And then I'll talk about the new mix, track by track, what I think of each one. Then I'll go through track by track of the sessions. Then the mono, I'll talk about that as an overall thing rather than go through track by track, and then I'll do the EP to finish with. So this is probably going to be quite a long video, so if you make it all the way through, thank you very much. And I'll probably put timestamps down at the bottom. But now I'm going to put that down because it's the vinyl, and it's very heavy with the book, and I'm assuming it's all 180 gram vinyl in this day and age. So, the background for Revolver, the way it was recorded in 1966 was on 4 tracks, so basically everything was just done on 4 tracks. So like one track would be guitar, drums and bass, other track would be vocals, the third track would be like backing vocals, and for a song like Taxman, I think the 4th track had the lead guitar on and cowbell and stuff like that. And you know, a lot of people ask, well, there's been nothing wrong with it for the last 56 years, why are we getting it remixed now? And just like the other ones, no one is forcing you to listen to it. However, with Revolver, and particularly Revolver and the albums that came before it, if you listen to it through headphones, I imagine originally when people started listening to stereo, vinyl, CDs, etc. in the 80s, it probably didn't sound quite as bad as it does now. When you listen the original stereo mix, where you listen through headphones, and in one ear you've got the vocals, and then in the other ear you've got the guitar and the drums and the bass and everything, and it sounds crap. It's, you know, it makes it a hard listen. And for example, if one of your headphones breaks, you have to get a new pair, otherwise Revolver is completely unlistenable, because all you'll be able to hear is like the guitar, which is pointless. So this new mix kind of modernizes it in a way, because it centralizes everything so it's not split awkwardly for headphone listeners like me. And the way but obviously they couldn't do it for the older albums pre-Sgt. Pepper originally, because everything was stuck together on one track. They couldn't separate the guitar, the drums and the bass. But thanks to Peter Jackson and his team, who worked on the Get Back project last year, the documentary series on Disney, they've been able to use that technology that they're using that to demix Revolver. So now they've been able to somehow magically, I don't understand how it works, but it does somehow, split everything. So the guitars are on their own, you've got a separate track for the drums, separate one for the bass, separate one for the vocals and all the sound effects and everything, which means Giles Martin's been able to remix it, which is very exciting, because it hopefully means they can do the rest of the albums. But Revolver at the minute is what he's done first, and yeah, very impressed with it for the most part. So in terms of the box set so far, I've always felt that the White Album has been the best one in terms of content. However, I will say, first impressions, Revolver is rivaling it for that title. I think this is a genuinely really good box set. I think it's better than the Let It Be and the Abbey Road one. The Sgt. Pepper one's that's probably about, I think that Sgt. Pepper's probably second place for me. White Album's always been first, but they both might be about to get buffed down for or nerfed down for the Revolver box set, which I personally feel is, with the outtakes and everything, it is a really good box. So we will start by going through the box set. We'll go, I should point out as well, I haven't actually listened to this vinyl yet because I was quite busy yesterday, didn't have a chance. So I am going to listen to this. I'll probably listen to it later if I get a chance. If I don't, it'll be later in the week, but I wanted to do this video. But I have listened to it all the way through a few times through headphones, which is my primary way of listening. So what I'm about to say is based on listening through headphones via Apple Music. So it might sound different when I listen to the vinyl, but hey ho. Alright, so the book. Something's just fell out by the sound of it, no idea what. We'll find it in a bit. So this is the book, Revolver. Got the little apple on the back. You maybe can't see on the camera, but like the hair, the Beatles' hair is like sort of engraved into the book. So this will just be the usual business. Just, you know, you've got like contents and photos of the band. Very good. And photographs. The usual, as it starts with as all the other ones have, with a foreword from Paul. Really like that photo of Paul there. I've seen it before, but and then the usual. This book, it gives you the story of the album. It'll give you, I imagine, the road to it, how they got to this, and then track by track analysis. You know, for example, there we've got the one about Eleanor Rigby and the handwritten lyrics. It is a high quality book, this. There's the lyrics for I'm Only Sleeping. I'm aware you can't see what I'm talking about mostly here, but yeah, very good book. I will be having a read of this at some point. It even talks about the singles of the sessions, the singles that were recorded during the sessions, which is on the EP, Paperback Writer and Rain. A bit about the cover by Klaus Vormann. There's a cartoon in the back of this book for some reason. I'll have to have a read of it. Talks about the reception they got at the time. And then the track listing that's on this box set, I imagine, and then the credits and things. So that's the book. Next up, we're going to talk about the new mix, which should be this one. It is. So this is it. The new mix is on vinyl. From back, record itself. Just be the classic. Yeah, it is. Just a classic Parlophone label. This does of course follow the UK pressing, as do the Beatles' official catalogue now, because I know in America this album was altered slightly at the time, but I think in the 80s they universally changed it all to be like a worldwide standard Beatle catalogue, which was the UK catalogue. Anyway, so this is a new mix. We'll go through this track by track. I have gone modern and I'm now using an iPad. I've got a lot to talk about. Oh, these are all the notes I've made, so no more pen and paper, we're on an iPad now. Anything else I want to say before we went to the track by track? I just discovered yesterday, I was listening to an interview with Noel Gallagher and Matt Wilkinson, and I did not know this was the only Beatles album that was recorded at Abbey Road, but not in Studio 2. The entire thing was apparently done in Studio 3. I didn't know this. I don't actually know if that's accurate or not, but apparently so. Apparently it was all done in Studio 3 rather than Studio 2, because Studio 2 was apparently booked. Anyway, right, this new mix. So, as usual, it's the same running order, so it opens with Taxman. This one was released a few weeks ago, about a month or two ago now, as a lead sort of single. And the first thing you will notice if you've been listening to this in headphones for years, is it no longer has that awkward split. You haven't got the vocals in one side and the guitar and everything in the other. It's now just all centralised. And because I listen on Apple Music, it was the Dolby Atmos mix, which was very cool. The vocals are much more up front now from George, and the backing vocals are also much more up front. And Ringo's drums are particularly a lot more clearer on this song. And I seem to notice the cowbell, it seems a lot louder as well. I have heard some people say the tambourine is maybe a bit quieter. I can't say I've personally noticed, but definitely noticed that the cowbell is louder on Taxman. Yeah, this is a much better mix of Taxman, in my humblest of opinions. Right, Eleanor Rigby comes next. So once again, Paul's vocals are up front. I'm basically going to say that about every song on this. But yeah, Paul's vocals are up front. They hit you in the centre much more. And the orchestra as well, it's a lot clearer. It sounds like it's been enhanced, probably remastered the audio as well, has remixed it. Something else that's been fixed as well. I don't think this was ever on the mono version, but on the stereo version, originally when it first kicked in, the vocals were in the centre, and then when the Eleanor Rigby bit came in, as Paul started singing it, it suddenly all just went like that to the side, the vocals. I think it was to the right channel. Apparently this was a mistake that Jeff Emerick made when he was doing the stereo mix. Jeff Emerick at the time would have been, I don't even know if he'd have been 20 when because this was the first Beatles album he worked on. I don't know if he would even have been 20 when he worked on this. But he messed up on Eleanor Rigby apparently, and he mixed it wrong, and that's why for all these years it sounded not right on when the verse kicks in and sort of the vocal suddenly shoots off to the side. It didn't do it on the mono, and it now doesn't do it on the stereo. It's finally been fixed by Giles. Yeah, Eleanor Rigby, very, very good. Right, track 3, I'm Only Sleeping. This is an incredible song. I always forget how good a song this is. And when I was listening to this radio, if you haven't heard it, by the way, and you're a Noel Gallagher fan, I highly recommend listening to it on Apple Music Radio. It's very, very good. And Noel says this is like one of the best Beatles songs there is. And he makes another good point that Revolver, although it is arguably the Beatles' best album that they ever did, other than Yellow Submarine and Eleanor Rigby, there's not really a lot of well-known stuff on here. It's like well-known to us Beatles fans, but to casual people, a lot of people probably never have heard of half the stuff on here, which is remarkable, really, when you think about it, because, yeah, it's Revolver, isn't it? It's, to me, and to probably you watching it, it's potentially the greatest album ever recorded. And yet there's a lot of songs that a lot of people out there will never have heard, and this is probably one of them. But anyway, with I'm Only Sleeping, John's vocals, like on the other two tracks, are much more up front. They're a lot more central. And the bass and the drums, I found, are a lot more clearer now. And the backwards guitar, not so much on the solo, but throughout the verses, every so often when it sort of comes in on the verses, I noticed personally it sounded a lot louder to me. And Paul's harmony vocals in parts is a lot clearer. Whilst I always suspected it was Paul doing the harmony, obviously it could have been George, but now it's a lot clearer. You can clearly tell it's Paul McCartney's voice singing along. And the biggest thing, the most important thing, is the yawn on this song is now a lot louder. It's how it should be. Yeah, that's good, very good. Right, track 4, Love You Too. This is a remarkable song because of the way, you know, it's got this Indian stuff, which at the time must have been so far out and ahead of its time, because, you know, you got to remember, just a year and a half, 2 years before this, the Beatles were still singing like boy-girl love songs. Now they're singing stuff like this as people standing around to screw you in the ground. It's unfathomable, really, the development, the speed they developed at as a band. It would be the equivalent now of, I think who's like Taylor Swift, for example, at the minute. Just, you know, her fans are predominantly younger girls, and suddenly just her dropping acid and then making the most far out thing that has never been heard before. Because that's another thing about this album, that's now we can hear what came after it, but at the time this was just, when this first came out, and there won't be many people now who can remember this, the world when Revolver first came out, and this was just like, nothing will have been heard like this before. It's remarkable. But yeah, Love You Too. George's vocals are, once again, they're up front, and the sitar also sounds clearer, to the point where I was like really intrigued by George's sitar playing on this, because earlier on, like, not earlier on in the year, just at the back end of 1965 when Rubber Soul came out, December 65, it was the first time the Beatles had put a sitar on a track, which was on Norwegian Wood. And by all accounts, this was like George's first proper attempt at it. He hadn't really played it much before then, so he was kind of guessing his way. But then you listen to him playing it on this song, and it's like he's an expert. And I've never really properly listened to this song like this, where you can clearly hear George playing the sitar, and I was like, Jesus Christ, he's brilliant at it, isn't he? Yeah, great song. Here, There and Everywhere. So this one, the guitar and the bass seems a lot more clearer, and the backing vocals, the oohs, seem a lot higher in the mix than they used to be, which I do like. Paul's voice, once again, it's clearer and it's centralised, it's up front in the mix. And just another thing I've wrote here, it's beautiful. It is a beautiful song, this, and Paul often gets asked, what's your favourite song you've ever written? What's the song you want to be remembered for? And it's a stupid question, really. But recently, he seems to have been saying this song here, there and everywhere. Keeps cropping up. I believe this was their response to God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. Useless little fact for you there. But that's another thing that I think is remarkable about this album. I'll keep going off topic here. John and George were obviously on acid at this point, but Paul wasn't. Which in some ways helps the album, because you've got John and George writing all these particularly John writing all these songs that are kind of clearly inspired by acid trips. But then Paul is sort of bringing it back down to earth with some of the best songs he's ever written. Like this one, and Eleanor Rigby, and For No One, and Got to Get You Into My Life and stuff. This is probably Paul hitting his stride. Like, from here until about 1969, Paul was probably the greatest songwriter in the world. Yeah. And this song is just one of the ones that goes to prove it. And it's funny because when I first started properly listening to Revolver, I'd have been a teenager, you know. I think you play most teenagers this album, it'll probably help shape their life if you play it at the right point in their life. But when I was younger, and I'm saying this at the ripe old age of 24, which is quite useful actually, because I am now the age Paul was when he wrote his songs on this album. It's remarkable, really, that a 24-year-old man could write songs like this. But when I was younger, John and George's songs were my favourite on this album. But now, I'm starting to prefer Paul's in a lot of ways. But anyway, yeah, Here, There and Everywhere, beautiful song, beautiful mix. Giles has done a great job on this one. Yellow Submarines. It's a funny song, this, because it's not really one I listen to. Normally when I listen to Revolver, I actually skip this song. It's not that I've got anything against it, it's just I can't be bothered with it. But it is obviously probably the most famous song on the album. But one of the things I noticed was that the guitar kicks in straight away now, so that's like the original mono. So like the Sgt. Pepper remix in 2017, it was based entirely off the mono mix. And then all the ones after that have obviously been based off the stereo mixes. But this one was based off of the mono mix, it seems, and you can tell on this song, because in the town, when it goes in the town, at that part, the guitar kicks in as Ringo sings, whereas on the original stereo mix, Ringo sang that line and then the guitar kicked in. But once again, Ringo's voice is higher in the mix, it's much more central, it hits you a lot more. And the sound effects, they seem to be clearer and enhanced more, and I seem to notice like the waves and stuff seem to be louder. Yeah, it's good. And on the chorus, I found it was a lot more easy to work out each Beatles voice, so I could hear, obviously you can hear Ringo, but I could hear Paul. I think Paul singing like a high note, I could hear John singing, and I could just hear George singing, which was cool. And the Life of Ease backing vocal has been added back in on the stereo, because on the mono mix, on the last verse when Ringo goes, as we live a life of ease, and then the response, a life of ease, that bit was never on the stereo, it was only ever on the mono. But thankfully here it's been added back onto the stereo, which is good. Right, She Said comes next. This seems to be a very controversial mix. A lot of people seem to be not enjoying this one, and I think I imagine the reason is because the guitars don't seem as loud, which is something I've noted down. However, through headphones, it's not sounded as bad as I was expecting it to be, because based on earlier people who had heard it before it came out, they were all saying the same thing, that they don't like this version. So I was coming in expecting to be hating it, and I don't. Now, maybe when I put the vinyl on, I will have a different opinion, but at the moment, it does seem like a much more spaced out mix. So obviously because of the way it was recorded on 4-track, everything was like very tight, which as a band, it made it sound like it was a band playing, but now it sounds like Paul's in one corner, Ringo's in another corner, George is in another corner, and John's in the other corner. And there's all this space in between them. It's probably the best way to describe it. And John's vocals now are a lot more up front, and the bass and the drums has also been made louder, but it seems the guitars have gone the other way, they've been turned down, which I don't personally think was a good idea. I think the guitars should have been left as they were, and the backing vocals I thought sounded quieter as well, which is a shame because I like the backing vocals on this song. But yeah, She Said, some like it, some don't. Personally, I'm still on the fence about it. I will have a better idea once I've listened to the vinyl, but based on headphones, it doesn't seem as bad as people are making it out to be. Right, Good Day Sunshine comes next. This is never been one of my favourites, this one. But drums, bass and piano, they're all a lot clearer. Paul's voice, once again, is at the front of the mix. The spoken bit in the middle where there's a speech bit. You know when Paul sings, she feels good, and then there's a bit that kind of, it was always deep in the mix, and I always assumed when she does. You know the bit, I hope you know the bit I mean. That bit has been turned up, and it's much clearer now, and I'm pretty sure they are singing She Does in response to Paul's vocals. And I assume it's John or Ringo saying it. I would imagine it's probably John in responding to Paul. That's louder. As are the hand claps. I've never really noticed the hand claps in this song, but they're much more noticeable now, which is cool. Right, track 9, And Your Bird Can Sing. Bass and drums are louder, vocals are up front, they're in the middle. Paul's harmonies also seem to have been enhanced a bit. They're a bit clearer. You can tell you always could tell it was Paul, but it sounds a lot more like Paul McCartney's voice. That makes more sense in my head. But yeah, And Your Bird Can Sing, it still rocks. It's a great tune. I really like And Your Bird Can Sing. Right, track 10, For No One. This is probably my favourite song on the album now. Yeah. Again, a 24-year-old man wrote this song. It's remarkable when you listen to the lyrics. But something I have noticed is the piano sounds a lot clearer and a lot more up front. You can hear, it sounds like Paul is like crashing down on the keys. I'm assuming it's Paul playing it anyway. Yeah, really like that. I really like how the piano sounds. And Paul's vocals seem to be at the same level as the piano. So it seems to be the piano and Paul's vocals are at the front of the mix, or they're the loudest in the mix. The bass is also clearer, and I don't know if it's a shaker or a tambourine, but it's some form of percussion. That's a lot clearer. And I've also wrote that this song, it is a beautiful song. Right, next track, Dr. Robert. I didn't really notice a massive amount of difference with Dr. Robert. The bass seemed a bit clearer, and the guitar and the vocals seemed to be at a similar level, which they always were. And although I did notice on the harmony vocals on the well, well, well bit, it sounded a lot quieter. Like, I always felt on the original stereo, Paul's voice seemed louder than John's, but now it's the other way around. John's is louder than Paul's, which, yeah, was a difference I noticed. Right, track 12, I Want to Tell You. This is potentially the most underrated track on the album. It's a really good song. One thing I like is the intro guitar. If you're listening on headphones, it starts off in the right and it gradually works its way across to the left. Similar to how Her Majesty did on the Abbey Road box set. But yeah, George's vocals are higher in the mix and the piano sounds a tad clearer. But other than that, it's still the same song. It rocks along. Yeah, really good tune. Alright, track 13, Got to Get You Into My Life. First thing I noticed, the horns up front, centre, hit you. Much louder. The bass is also louder. However, I felt in some areas that Paul's voice was actually drowned out a bit by the horns, which, I mean, it is a horny song, but yeah, I don't think it should be drowning out the vocals. I think they should be at a similar level, but there was a couple of points where I thought, I can't hear Paulie, the horns are too loud. But then on the outro, Paul's vocals are a lot louder. Like, it used to be his vocals seem to fade out, but they don't. They just stay as loud as it goes on, which makes it a lot clearer and easier. I mean, you can always understand him, but it's a lot easier to understand him now. Yeah. Got to Get Into My Life. For the most part, it's a pretty good mix. Just there's a few occasions where the horns are a bit loud, but otherwise, it's fine. And then the closing track, Tomorrow Never Knows. So I've wrote here that the drums are clearer, John's vocals are up front, and the piano at the end still sounds like, the piano outro at the end seems a bit clearer than it used to be. And this song, it still sounds like the future. It still sounds like music has not really reached the level of this song. It still sounds futuristic now. I suppose the closest we've ever come to this sort of thing was the Chemical Brothers, maybe in the 90s, but otherwise it still sounds very futuristic. But yeah, in terms of the remix itself, there's not really a lot you could do to Tomorrow Never Knows, because it's not like it's really got guitars and stuff on it. It's predominantly tape loops, so, you know, it doesn't sound massively different to me, to my ears at least, but it's decent enough. So that is the new mix of Revolver. Overall, I think it's for the most part it is a good mix. It will probably be where I go to now to listen to this album, which, you know, is what's happened with Sgt. Pepper, Abbey Road, etc. The new mixes are what I tend to roll with now. But, you know, I always used to say when I was younger that Revolver was the best Beatles album. And then the White Album box set came out, and then I've been saying since then that the White Album is the best Beatles album. This remix may be about to make me change my mind back to Revolver being the best Beatles album. But anyway, that is the new stereo mix, so we're going to move on now to probably the main event for most people. Oh, if I can get it out. Have I left the EP? Yeah, the EP's in there. The Sessions. That's the front cover of it. That's the back cover. So for those of you who don't know, I believe this was done by Robert Freeman, this cover. Cover design, yeah, Robert Freeman. This was originally supposed to be the album cover for Revolver, and thank God they didn't go with this, because, I mean, there's no comparison really. Whilst this does look better on vinyl than I've seen, the little pictures I've seen of it online, I've never really flattered this. On vinyl it does look better, but yeah, it's not as good really. As a cover, this is a gatefold, this Sessions. There you go. And the back is a slightly different cover. Outtake photo, I imagine, from the Sessions. Anyway, I will put that on there. There are 31 outtakes on here, some of which are on Anthology 2, but a lot of which have never been officially released before. However, if you've heard bootlegs, you've probably heard a lot of this stuff. I'll run through each thing track by track, give you my thoughts on the outtakes and stuff, and then at the end I'll give you my overall thoughts on how the outtakes compare to other outtakes we've had from the previous box sets. Probably makes more sense in my head. Right, so this Sessions box album bit starts off with Tomorrow Never Knows, take 1. So this was on Anthology 2, so we've all heard this before. The only difference is this includes the speech at the end where they're talking. On the Anthology versions of any song on here, really, any speech has been removed on the Anthology versions. They've been edited and tweaked about with the Anthology ones, but on here they haven't. The speeches have all been left in, which is nice because it lets you hear them speaking and things and discussing the song. This version, though, it's slower and it's before all the tape loops have been added. There's not a lot to say. Most people have heard this. Right, second track is Tomorrow Never Knows Mono Mix RM11. I don't actually know what that means. I'm assuming it means Rough Mix 11. Personally, I didn't think this sounded very different to the finished thing. There's a couple of maybe extra tape loops on it and in different places of the song, but otherwise it is literally Tomorrow Never Knows, and if you didn't know, you would just assume you were just listening to Tomorrow Never Knows. Right, anyway, next track, Got to Get You Into My Life, first version, take 5. This version was on Anthology 2 as well. This is the slower version, the more like the one with the organ and acoustic guitars. Like I say, this is on Anthology 2, but the first minute of this song is the Beatles discussing it, where they seem to be debating about the organ. Paul seems to want to do something different to the rest of them. Like, I think John and Ringo and George Martin are all saying, like, let the organ be the intro, but I think Paul wants to start, like, on the organ, but then start recording after the organ's already been going. This makes more sense in my head. Listen to it if you want to know what I mean. But it's a much more stripped back version, this, if you've never heard it. It's an organ and acoustic guitars. That's about it. But something I do like about this version that isn't on the finished thing is the backing vocals and the harmony vocals, the oohs and where they all sing along on Every Single Day of My Life. Yeah. Right, next track, Got to Get You Into My Life, second version, unnumbered mix. Wow. I love this version. So it's kind of like a hybrid of the first version with the organ and the finished version on Revolver itself. But there's no brass. Instead of the brass, we have, like, I think it's a fuzz bass, which sounds similar to Think For Yourself off Rubber Soul, that sort of guitar bass thing. And yeah, I really like it. But otherwise, like, the guitar, the rest of the guitar and the drums is pretty much the finished version. Paul's vocals sound like how they do on the final version. However, the backing vocals are still here. The other Beatles are still singing along in places, and the Somehow Someway bit after Got to Get You Into My Life, Somehow Someway, still exists on this version. I actually in some ways prefer this version. I don't want to say it yet, but maybe I'll end up preferring this version to the version with the horns that we've known for all these years. Who knows? It's very, very good though, this version. And then track 5, Got to Get You Into My Life, second version, take 8. This is an instrumental version, which sounds just like the finished version, I think, but without the vocals. It's the backing track, but the horns are now here. They sound great. They're very loud and upfront. When you listen to it, you can slightly hear Paul's ghost vocals, which is basically what that is if you don't know. It's when the band are playing it in the studio and the singer is singing along just so you know where you are in the song, with the intention that they will re-record their vocals at a later point. So I imagine like whatever it is, whether it be a microphone on Paul's bass or a microphone on Ringo's drums or something, it's picking up Paul's voice in the background. Yeah. Right, next up, track 6, Love You Too, take 1. What a revolution this song is. What a revelationary thing to discover. Who knew that Love You Too started off as an acoustic song? This is George on an acoustic guitar. It sounds pretty much like a demo, but it's a very different song to the one that got released, and it's very cool. I really like this version. It sounds very much like what they did with the Isha demos for the White Album. Actually, the intro when George starts strumming reminded me of the Isha demo of Me and Mr. Mustard. If you listen to take 1 of Love You Too and then the Isha demo of Me and Mr. Mustard, they kind of sound like similar intros. Yeah, this song, it works. Considering like all these years it has been a Indian sort of sitar song, who knew it would work so well as an acoustic song? It is a really, really good tune. Anyway, after that we've got Love You Too, Unnumbered Rehearsal. To me this sounds like it's George just practicing the sitar parts. He's decided to change it from an acoustic song into an Indian sort of sitar song. Yeah, it just sounds like it's in practice and trying to work it out and then sort of work out how the vocals are going to be. I don't know why I'm doing this. And once again, if you listen to this, you hear how actually incredible George is at the sitar. It's very good. And then next up, we've got Love You Too, take 7. This is effectively just the finished version on Revolver, except at the end of each verse, Paul sings along with George. So Paul does a harmony with George. It's cool to hear, but I actually do think they did the right thing taking Paul's harmony vocals off this. I don't think it adds to it, and I don't think it's any different it not being there. It probably enhances it not being there, to be honest. Yeah. Right, after that we've got Paperback Writer, takes 1 and 2. Paperback Writer was obviously recorded in the sessions. It was released as a non-album single. I will get to Paperback Writer and Rain in a minute, but takes 1 and 2, this is apparently all that exists of Paperback Writer in terms of outtakes. Take 2 is the one that they used. This is an instrumental. It's incredible, I've wrote here, that not many bands could nail a song like Paperback Writer this quick. They start playing it on take 1 and then they just sort of give up, something goes wrong, and then they're straight back into it with take 2, which seems to be like the backing track that they'd use, and then Paul would add his vocals later on. Yeah, not many bands could nail a song like Paperback Writer in 2 takes. It's an incredible listen. Right, track 10. This is an incredible thing. Rain, take 5, but at the actual speed. So, for those of you that don't know about Rain, which I imagine if you're watching this, you probably know this anyway, but Rain started off where they played it really fast and then they slowed it down. So, the version that has always been out there is a slowed down version of the recording of it. This is the speed they actually recorded it at in the studio, and they're going at it like maniacs, especially Paul on that bass and Ringo on the drums. It's incredible. Honestly, it blew my mind. Listening to them, like, I thought, how on earth can you play bass that quick and drums that quick like that? It goes to show how talented they are as musicians. And this is take 5, so I don't know if they've done other takes before this at this speed. It is incredible. Yeah, it's mind-blowingly good. I've even wrote, wow, wow, wow. It is only an instrumental, but honestly, listen to this if you want your mind blown to hear them, how Rain was originally recorded. And then track 11 is Rain, take 5, slowed down for master tape. So this is the fast version. It was just the track before, but now it's been slowed down to the speed we know it. Someone, I imagine it was Jeff Emmerich, had to spend 16 hours in Abbey Road slowing it down to the speed it needed to be. And by this point, John's vocal has been added, but the backing vocals are not there yet, so it's getting pretty close to the finished thing. All it needs is the backing vocals from Paul and George. But yeah, it's decent enough. Yeah, it's very cool to have. Not quite as cool as having it at its actual speed, but yeah. Right, track 12 is next, which is Dr. Robert, take 7. I personally didn't think this was all that different from the finished version, except the guitars on the Well, Well, Well bit was a bit different. They played slightly different lines on the guitar for the Well, Well, Well part. Yeah. Right, next track, And Your Bird Can Sing, first version, take 2. So this was on Anthology 2, except on the Anthology 2 version, the Beatles started giggling. But this is that same version, but without the giggling. I actually think this was on the Anthology TV series, the documentary series, but it was never, the audio was never released. Yeah, it's a really nice version. It's a slightly different tempo, but I like it. I do like it, and apparently this was nearly the version they went with. John was satisfied with it, and then they came in the next day and they just decided to do it again. And when they decided to do it again, that was the one that got released. But one thing about this version is Paul's vocals are louder than John. So even though John is singing the lead, Paul on the harmony vocal actually gets more dominant than John in places. Yeah, I really like this version. And then after that we've got the same thing. We've got And Your Bird Can Sing, first version, take 2, but with the giggling. So this is literally just the version on Anthology 2. It is the same thing but with the giggling. The only slight difference to the Anthology 2 version is there's a little bit of talking at the start. But otherwise, this is on Anthology 2. I don't think there'll be much reason to listen to this, other than if you just happen to be listening to the sessions. Otherwise, I imagine most people will listen to the other version, which is the same thing but without the giggling. This all makes sense in my head. Right, next one we have And Your Bird Can Sing, second version, take 5. So by this point the song has taken shape. It is well, it obviously had taken shape, but this is where they came back in and decided to do it again. However, this version is actually slower. It's slower than the first version, and it's slower than the version that went on the album. And it's quite cool, and during the guitar solo there's a lot of R's. The band are all going, ah. Sorry, don't mean to scare you all with my singing there. But yeah, I quite like those R's that have been added in here. Yeah, and Paul's harmony on this version, on this take in particular, seems to be much more restricted. John is very much at the top of the vocal ranges. Paul occasionally joins in, but for the most part it is just John on his own. Right, after that we have Taxman, take 11. This is the version that's on Anthology 2, and it is exactly the same as the Anthology 2 version. Yeah, I mean, this is the 11th take, which means there's at least 10 other takes. I've never heard them, obviously, but why didn't they include one of them rather than this version, which we already have? Which is literally the exact same song, except there's a couple of bits where there's slightly different guitar licks, and the line about Harold Wilson and Ted Heath doesn't exist yet. It's the anybody got any money bit they sing. Yeah, it's alright. Not much reason to listen to it since it just sounds like the finished thing, but without the better vocals, the better backing vocals. Right, next track is I'm Only Sleeping, rehearsal fragment. Again, this version was on Anthology 2 as that instrumental piece. It's only about 50 seconds. It's really nice. It's really sort of chill, and I dig it, I've wrote here. But yeah, I like it. I like the Anthology 2 version of this, which is also the exact same thing. There's no additional speaking. It's just literally the exact same thing. And then we have the next track, which is I'm Only Sleeping, take 2. So what is interesting here is take 1 exists on Anthology 1, which is an acoustic version. So if you look, and then we have this, which is the next take, which is a bit more bassy. It seems like a little bit of a step up from take 1, but it's missing the backwards guitars, and yeah, it seems a very bassy version, this take, but it's getting to sound like I'm Only Sleeping. It's starting to take shape and you can tell where it's going. But then after that we have I'm Only Sleeping Take 5, which is completely throws everything out the window about this song. It sounds nothing like it. It's an instrumental, it's faster, and it sounds like the soundtrack for a Western film. Like, you watch a Western and then play this song on top of it, and it will work. You know, this is now in the public domain, so if I was making a Western, I would try and include this version, because, yeah, it's very good. I've wrote down that I love it, all in capitals. Yeah. It's a Wild West version of I'm Only Sleeping. And then after that we've got I'm Only Sleeping, Mono Mix RM1. Again, I don't know what RM is. I'm assuming it means rough mix. And just like the one for Tomorrow Never Knows, it sounds pretty much like the finished thing, except there's a little bit extra backwards guitar in places. But otherwise, you wouldn't really notice any difference. After that, track 21 of 31, Eleanor Rigby, Speech Before Take 2. So this is interesting because George Martin is talking with the orchestra, trying to work out how it goes, and he gets Paul involved, and Paul obviously has not got a clue what they're talking about. He's sort of probably overwhelmed as a working class lad now in this completely different world with these like properly trained musicians talking about things like, and we'll put this on bar 38, or we could put that on bar 39. And I mean, I don't know what that means. I don't know what I'm on about there, and I don't imagine Paul understood then. Yeah, he's sort of like, you can tell listening to it that Paul does not really know what to say. And it's quite amusing because they're asking him, do you like it going like, they play it one way and they say, do you like it like this? And then they play it another way and say, oh, do you want it like that? And Paul kind of goes back to them, well, what do you think? I'm not sure. So, yeah, it's interesting to hear. And then after that we have Eleanor Rigby Take 2, which, as far as I'm aware, I think this is the version on Anthology 2, which is literally just Eleanor Rigby but without the vocals. It's just an instrumental version of it. Yeah, nice to have. After that, For No One, Take 10, backing track. I'm not sure if this is if this is just For No One but without Paul's vocals and the French horn. It's just the backing track. But at the start of it, Paul is discussing drums with Ringo. It's a nice instrumental, and I'm not sure why they've included this version, because I've heard bootlegs of this. I've heard bootlegs of alternative takes of this song where there is versions with Paul singing along. I think Take 13, which is actually on YouTube, if you search For No One Take 13, it doesn't sound too dissimilar to this version, but there's also vocals from Paul. Yeah, I'd rather have had something like that, an alternative take with vocals from Paul, rather than what I assume this is just the finished take but without Paul's vocals and the French horn. Right after that, track 24, Yellow Submarine, Songwriting Tape, Part 1. So this is the thing that has got a lot of people talking. Before it came out, this was the big thing they were talking about when advertising this, that for years and years and years we've all assumed Paul wrote this song, but they were like, no, it was John. And this is basically John singing with an acoustic guitar, singing In the Town Where I Was Born, No One Cared, No One Cared. And that is literally it. That is all. It's just in the town where I was born, no one cared, no one cared. Yeah, that seems to be all he's got in terms of lines. But it sounds very Plastic Ono Bandy, if that makes sense. Like what he'd be doing 4 years later on Plastic Ono Band. That sort of style of singing and things. Like very vulnerable in his voice. It's really cool. It's really nice to hear. There's not a lot of substance to it, but it's nice to hear. It's nice. It's amazing that this has never been released before, or even it's been sat by all accounts in, I assume, in the Dakota for many years, because Sean Lennon gave it to Giles Martin for this. And then after that we have Yellow Submarine Songwriting Work Tape Part 2. So this is the more interesting one, I think, because by this point Paul has come in. And this is one of the very, very few times where you can actually listen to Lennon and McCartney work, and you can hear them discussing things. You can hear them discussing how things go, and the lyrics have now been taken shape a lot more. They've got the first verse and they've got the chorus. John tries to get Paul to sing it, but Paul refuses and says that John knows how it goes. So this is John singing Yellow Submarine, and then Paul sings along with him on the chorus. And this kind of sounds like a Bob Dylan song. The way they're playing it and the way they're singing it sounds very Dylan. And I actually think John sings this quite well. In some ways, I kind of wish they kept it kind of like this on the finished thing with John singing it, because I think it could have been a better song than what we got, which was a children's song. Anyway, next up after that, we've got Yellow Submarine, take 4 before sound effects. Ringo is now singing. I think this is the finished take, but the only difference is the sound effects aren't there, so it's just the Beatles on it. Just the Beatles themselves playing their guitar, playing their acoustic guitars, and singing along with Ringo. And I actually kind of prefer this version without all the sound effects. Yeah, it's cool. It is a cool version. Yeah, I do think it works well without the sound effects. And then after that, we have Yellow Submarine highlighted sound effects. So this is interesting because it has a new intro, which is quite a cool intro. It's a bit like a sea shanty. Yeah, if you've never listened to it, give that a listen because, yeah, it's cool hearing them do, like, they're singing this sea shanty and then suddenly it just goes straight into Yellow Submarine. Sound effects on this version, they're much louder, they're much more prominent, but otherwise it's just the finished thing but with louder sound effects and a sea shanty at the start. Right, next up I want to tell you Speech and Take 4. They're joking about at the start of this because George hasn't got a name for it, and they're joking about how George never has names for his songs. But otherwise it's an instrumental version of it, and for reasons I do not understand, Giles Martin, I assume, just cuts it off. Like, they're playing it, the instrumental's going, and then it just cuts off and fades back into speech, and it's like, well, why have you cut it off? But anyway, after that we've got Here, There and Everywhere, take 6. There's no ooze on this version, it's just Paul's voice. The guitar and drums and a tiny bit of bass, but otherwise it is effectively Here, There and Everywhere, but without the enhanced production. But yeah, it's alright. Track 30, She Said, John's demo. This has been around as a bootleg for years. I've heard it on bootleg. It was on YouTube for years as a bootleg. In fact, it was still there last week as a bootleg. Yeah, we've all heard it, you know, the version, you know, you're making me feel like my trousers are torn, and I said, who put all that crap in your head? This song, it works surprisingly well acoustically. I like it. I've always liked this demo, to be honest. Yeah, it's good. And then after that, the last on this sessions, we've got She Said, take 15, backing track rehearsal. This is an instrumental which doesn't sound too different from the finished version of She Said. But one thing you can hear on here is Paul is speaking. So Paul is obviously at this session for years and years and years. It's been rumoured that, or it's been, not rumoured, it's been pretty much accepted and as the universal thing that Paul is not on She Said. Apparently they had a bit of an argument and Paul stormed out and he wasn't on the song. But this kind of disproves it because you can hear him speaking, so it must be Paul on the bass. I have always wondered about this story because I thought that bass, it does sound like Paul. But yeah. But anyway, that is it. That is the outtakes. And in terms of outtakes, this is probably the best lot we've had. Yeah, it's better than what we got for Abbey Road. It's better than what we got for the Let It Be box set. And it's better than what we got for the Sgt. Pepper box set. It is a genuinely good set of outtakes here. You can hear all these songs taking shape from their earlier forms into their finished thing. Yeah. Really, really good. It is worth picking up this box set or listening to it on streaming or whatever you like, just for these outtakes. Very good. Highly, highly recommend. So that's the outtakes. Next up we have the mono, which has fallen out. Should have seen that coming. So the mono record I will show you. I didn't show you the record actually for the outtakes, but again, the Palaphone label of the day. But otherwise it is the same cover, etc. If I can get it back in, please go in. There we go. There you go, just the usual, except it's mono at the top, the usual back cover. So, what have I said about this? I'm just going to talk about this overall rather than the individual tracks. So this is the original 1966 mix as it was released at the time. So this will be how the Beatles and George Martin mixed the album. This version. Obviously compared to the 2022 mix, the vocals are much deeper in the mix. The guitars and the instruments are a lot, like the guitars in particular, are a lot louder than the vocals. Bass and drums are obviously lowered as well, but that's predominantly because at the time obviously everybody was listening on vinyl, and if it's not 180 gram vinyl, it's with the deeper grooves. It means if because it would have been cheaper vinyl back then because of the amount of it that had to be produced. If it's too bassy, the needle will jump about. So yeah, bass is obviously quieter. Guitars are higher in the mix. It's nice to have this, but I'm not sure how often I will listen to it personally compared to the new mix, because I prefer the vocals being louder and up front. But it's nice to have this, as it's the best of both worlds, because all these people who twine about it being remixed, we don't need this, it's fine how it is, well, they can now get this with the mono version as the Beatles recorded it, as the Beatles mixed it, with the outtakes. So there you go. There's naught to twine about, is there? Although one thing is, I'm not sure why they've gone with an original 1966 version and not just re-released a 2014 remaster, because all that is it cleared up to remove, like, there's little bits where you can hear tape hiss and stuff at the end of tracks, but that's all removed on a remaster. It's just tidied up, just made sounds a little better. So why that wasn't included in here, I don't know. But anyway, it's nice to have. If you don't like the new mix, you've got the original mono included. So yeah, there we go. And it's good that the mono's been released, because for years and years and years, it's not really been in print. We've been stuck with the dodgy bloody stereo mix. Just noticed a mark on there. Right, anyway, finally, the controversial thing, the EP, which is based on the UK single artwork of the time. I'll sit that in there. So this is the Revolver EP, which consists of the singles Paperback Writer and Rain. These were recorded during the sessions for Revolver, and I'm on the side that I'm pleased we have this EP, because with the Sgt. Pepper box set, they included Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane with new mixes, which was really good. Then with the White Album, they didn't do it. They included outtakes of stuff like Hey Jude and Revolution and Lady Madonna and Inner Light, but then they didn't include remixes of the finished things. The remix of Lady Madonna and Inner Light and Revolution and Hey Jude were not included, and I felt a bit robbed by that. And then the same thing happened with Abbey Road. They included outtakes of Ballad of John and Yoko and Old Brown Shoe, but then they didn't include remixes of the finished thing. But then the Let It Be one was an interesting one, because they did include a remix of Don't Let Me Down and the original single mix of Let It Be, but then they didn't have a remix of You Know My Name, Look Up the Number. But they seem to have finally got it back to the Sgt. Pepper style here, where they've included the singles of the day, Paperback Writer and Rain, and it's remarkable. I mean, I know at the time the way it worked was singles did not go on albums and all of that stuff. Singles were a separate entity altogether, but it's amazing to think in this day and age, if someone wrote songs as good as Paperback Writer and Rain, they'd have it on their album, and for most people this would be the best tracks on their album, but the Beatles didn't even feel the need to include them. But on the first side of this EP, Paperback Writer and Rain's new mixes are on it, and then on the other side you've got the original mono. So the new mix, the new stereo mix of Paperback Writer, the bass is much louder, Paul's vocals are up front and in the centre, the Farrah Jacques backing vocals are louder, and it's just an incredible song. It's incredible it didn't make the album. Yeah, really like Paperback Writer. And then the remix of Rain. So John's vocals have been brought to the front. They're centralised. They're the loudest thing on there. The bass and drums, they seem even clearer. But then I felt the backing vocals, they need turned up a bit. I think Giles should have turned them up so that they were sort of more in tune with John's lead vocals at the same volume level. On the verses, on the chorus it's fine, but on the verses I think they needed turned up. And the guitars, they seem a bit lost in the mix, I felt. Yeah, I don't know where they've gone, but they seem lost in translation. And the backwards vocals at the end, they do seem a lot clearer now. It's much more clearer that it's them singing When the Rain Comes, They Run and Hide Their Heads backwards. And then the other side, Paperback Writer and Rain in mono. This is the original single as it was released at the time. For Paperback Writer, it seems louder than the new mix, which I prefer. Normally you find Giles Martin's mixes are louder than the originals, but in this instance I feel the original mono is louder than the new mix, the new stereo mix. And for Rain, I felt on the mono the guitars were clearer on the original mono, and the backing vocals, are better here than on the new mix. They're much louder, as they should be. So yeah, that is it. That is Revolver's new version, the Deluxe Anniversary Edition. So overall, it's a good package. I really like Revolver, and I think it's fair to say that this is the Beatles' best album. This is the greatest album ever recorded. I'm sorry, the White Album, but you've lost your crown again to Revolver. Giles has done it again. Great box set. Hopefully, you never know. I hope this manages to get back to #1 next Friday. We'll find out. The only real competition is if whatever Taylor Swift's new album beat manages to get their second week sales, but otherwise, it's not really got any competition this week for #1 in terms of new releases. Yeah, Revolver, great box set, best one yet, I think. Keep them coming. Hopefully Rubber Soul next. I'll hopefully be here this time next year for Rubber Soul. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you very soon. Ta-da!